Hello everybody and welcome back to the countdown of my top 100 favorite games of all time. It's hard to believe that we're already on episode 5, but just in case you missed episode 4, I'm going to throw a quick little recap up on the screen now. And now that we're all caught up, let's head over to Passkey for a rules refresher. No two games from the same series unless they are drastically different. Examples again, 2D Mario versus 3D Mario, and side games are allowed, but per side game series, I can only have one entry. So I can't have 2 Mario parties, but I could have a Mario Kart and a Mario Party. Thank you, Passkey, for that rules refresher. I'm not going to waste any more of your time here in the intro. Let's get into the countdown. Number 60, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. I've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh! On and off ever since I was a little kid, primarily the card game. However, I have had a bit of experience with different games throughout all the generations. And Master Duel was yet just another great tool that I've had to connect with others, especially now that I'm older and I play more online than I do in person. Some of my favorite times playing Master Duel were just trying to teach Romo Raider 99 how to play. Even though he has the basic idea down, he still can't figure out how to stop something like my Ancient Gear decks. If you want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! In a competitive format, but you can't make it to physical locations, Master Duel is a great tool, and I would definitely recommend it for that use case. But if you're trying to play as a casual player, you might be better off trying to find an alternative. Number 59, Guitar Hero Encore Rock the 80s. Honestly, I could have put almost any Guitar Hero game in this position except the World Tour. I don't really like that one, but I specifically chose Rock the 80s because the track selection was best fitted to my preference and genre, especially with songs like Play With Me, Round and Round, and Ballroom Blitz. But it's not just the track selection itself that makes Rock the 80s memorable, it's the whole design and the aesthetic of it where everything looks like it's from the 80s. Like, it still has that distinct Guitar Hero style, but everything has been aged back a little bit. For example, the characters and the age selection have been fine-tuned to better represent that 1980s culture and music as a whole during that time period. It was also the first Guitar Hero to offer widescreen support, which I don't know if you've ever played Guitar Hero without widescreen, but it is an entirely different experience. The gameplay itself is somewhere between Guitar Hero 1 and 2, which makes sense for the time that it actually came out, but in general, the thing I like most about this game is just the aesthetic. And if you like that 1980s aesthetic, I could definitely recommend you give it a try. Number 58, Mortal Kombat Armageddon. If you trap me on an island with only one game to play for the rest of my life, there's a very good chance that it is Mortal Kombat Armageddon, just because of the pure variety in all of its modes. Like, you have your classic arcade and story mode, that's nothing special, but you also have Conquest mode, which is like a full-on adventure game. But to top it all off, you have Motor Combat, which is a full Mortal Kombat themed kart racer. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's incredibly cool, but that's absolutely insane to just randomly have included as an extra. And we're not even diving into the Crypt, which has all your secret unlockables, a bunch of promo videos, all kinds of really cool content there. And don't get me started on the character selection. It has such a huge character roster that I don't even know who to pick. Don't get me wrong, I'm a Melina main until I die, but holy shit, there are so many options. But all this content does come at a cost. It is not nearly as fleshed out as some other Mortal Kombats would be with smaller rosters, because they're not doing as much to each individual character. They're really going for a quantity over quality, it feels like. If you're looking for a goofy time, play Motor Combat, not Mortal Kombat, Motor Combat inside of this game, and you might get a little chuckle out of just seeing the weird character models. But if you're looking for a more traditional Mortal Kombat experience, you can probably find it in other games. Number 57, Illbleed. Sorry boys, we're back again with another survival horror game on the Dreamcast. Except this one is special because it has a demon version of Sonic. But in all seriousness, Illbleed is a survival horror game where it takes place inside of an amusement park that is themed after different movie genres. And that's a very weird concept because the first thing that popped in my head was, oh, Scary Gex. I really love that this game doesn't take itself too seriously, but unfortunately that's where it kind of falls apart. The game itself is very fun to play, but since it doesn't take itself seriously, there's not very many like real spooks to be had within the game. While it is one of the most expensive games in the Dreamcast collection, I definitely think it is a must-have for any real Dreamcast collector because it is such a very unique game. If you like that low-budget, cheesy style horror, you're gonna love the aesthetic and the feel that Illbleed brings. I definitely recommend giving it a try if you're that kind of person. Number 56, Cuphead. Do I even need to give an introduction to Cuphead? I feel like everybody knows what it is at this point, but just in case you don't, it's a 2D platformer slash boss rush that utilizes a rubber hose art style made famous by Max Schleicher in the 1920s and 30s. While the game is known for being fairly hard, once you start learning the patterns and nuances of the actual gameplay itself, it simplifies itself to a very rudimentary level. I've done several playthroughs of the base game at this point, and I'm really looking forward to playing the DLC. I just haven't had time to get around to it yet. If you're an avid enjoyer of 2D platformers and the ones you've been playing feel a little bit too easy, this is one you should definitely be adding to your list of things to play. Number 55, Breakdown. I don't quite understand why this game is so polarizing as it is. For the era that it came out, it was groundbreaking with its first-person perspective, where you're not just doing basic hand-to-hand combat, you're also doing things like eating and drinking, all within that first-person perspective. While by today's standards that doesn't seem like anything to scoff at, back in the early 2000s, it was a completely different world, where simple things just as being in a first-person perspective and having individual arm controls was a major selling point of the game. Which that's also a huge point why I love this game so much. It's just because you have those individual arm controls. Your left trigger controls your left arm and your right trigger controls your right arm. And they do function independently from each other. Like you could have dual wield pistols, or a lot of the game is fighting hand-to-hand combat. When you're doing those right and lefts, it actually feels very tactile and very good to land. The controls aren't the game's only selling point though. The narrative of this game is absolutely wild. It incorporates elements of time travel and government conspiracies, but every game does have its downside, and this game's downside is that it feels incredibly empty. For example, the beginning areas of the game have maybe 1 to 2 enemies maximum per area, but if you can trudge through all of that and reach the meaty portion where the narrative really kicks in, it's definitely a fun game to pick up and play. Number 54, Altered Beast. Remember how earlier in the series when I talked about Alien Storm and how I first discovered it on Sonic's Genesis collection on the PS3? Well, the collection is back to strike again. This is how I found out about Altered Beast, but at the time it was a wildly different scenario. I didn't immediately fall in love with it or anything. I played through the first level and I was like, this is alright, and I moved on to try one of the other 20-something games that the collection had to offer. But when I got my Genesis, this was one of the games that came in the bundle, so I gave it another opportunity and I realized the game wasn't the problem. The game is fantastic. It's the DualShock 3 that I hated. The story to this game is absolutely awesome, and it's a shame that most of it is hidden inside the instruction manual. I'm not going to go over every single detail here, but the basis of the story is you play as a Centurion that has been raised from the grave to go rescue Athena from the underworld. Like, how cool is that? But from a gameplay perspective, it's also really interesting because it's halfway between a 2D platformer and a beat 'em up. If any of that sounds interesting to you, I implore you to take the hour that it takes to beat this game. That's right, it only takes 1 hour to beat the game. You definitely will not be disappointed. Number 53, Castle Crashers. So before recently replaying this game on stream with Rumarator99, this game probably would have ranked somewhere in the mid 90s, maybe high 80s. Because the gameplay itself is very engaging and I love the art style and humor that it presents, but where this game strives to be its best is in its multiplayer, because it mixes co-op within the actual stages itself with PvP during the princess saving sections, which was not something that I've gotten to experience before this point, because I primarily just played the game single player. Cooperatively, we beat the game in just 2 streams, I believe, which normally if we're playing a game and I'm looking at you a way out, it takes us multiple streams if not days. If you have a partner or a friend to play it with, I definitely recommend giving it a shot. However, if you're going into this game single player, it's probably going to come across as a slightly above average beat 'em up. Number 52, Katamari Forever. As someone who loved the original Katamari Damacy and we love Katamari, this was an awesome surprise to see that not only were they going to be pseudo remastered into HD, but also morphed together into one game with a bunch of additional content and overlays you could put on the screen to change the art style. I could sing the praises of the Katamari series all day long if I wanted to, but I'm not gonna do that here in this video. What I am gonna touch on though is that this came out on the PS3, which means I have to deal with that fucking DualShock 3 again. I was willing to make the trade-off for an HD Katamari game, even though it felt like I was selling my soul to the devil every time I used that shitty controller. So if I'm willing to look past the DualShock 3, this game is phenomenal, and I don't really have any gripes with it, other than that it's a little bit slower paced than other Katamari games. And I don't mean that in means of the actual gameplay, I mean it more in means as menu traversal and trying to get from one stage to the next. Katamari is a very weird franchise to try to recommend to somebody because you really don't know if they'll be into it. It's super weird, but it's super fun. If you looked at this gameplay and was like, I want to try that, it's worth giving it a shot on the PS3 if you have one, but I definitely wouldn't go out and get a system just to try this game. Number 51, Mickey's Racing Adventure. Similar to how we talked about Blaze Rush earlier in this list, this is also an isometric racing game. But this time we're on the Game Boy Color, so we don't have any thumbsticks to work with. Rather, we're using the D-pad similar to how we would play RC Pro-Am on the NES. This game is so much more than just a racing game though. It has full puzzle stages to get to the actual world select screen where you can actually pick the races and tracks you want to play on, along with a full hub world to walk around in and multiple different currencies to pick up and exchange. So there's an actual ecosystem in this game for both upgrading and for actually making it to new tracks itself. Not to mention you have the wonderful cast of Mickey and all of his friends, who aren't just here to sell a product, rather they're here because there's an actual story to this Game Boy Color game. Remember a little bit ago when I mentioned RC Pro-Am? Well, this is actually the same developers, and you're never gonna guess who it is. It absolutely blew my mind when I found out that Rareware made these random Mickey Mouse games, which I definitely should have seen coming because it controls exactly as you would expect it to if you've played like RC Pro-Am 2 on the NES. I was very excited when I heard there was a potential of an RC Pro-Am 64, however, that got scrapped and turned for Diddy Kong Racing, which that's a whole separate story. We're not talking about that on this, but I will make a video on it if you are interested. And to me, this feels like this generation's RC Pro-Am, which I absolutely adore. But there is a reason why it's down here on the list rather than way up where I personally would put it. And that's because the CPUs are so incredibly mind-numbingly hard that I cannot comprehend that this is supposed to be a Mickey Mouse game meant for children. But if you're looking for a challenge in a racing game like this may be the game for you. Alright boys, and with that, we're going to be all wrapped up for this episode. Before we get into the recap, I do just want to give a little reminder that we are still doing the giveaway. All you have to do is comment what your favorite game is done in any video in the entire series, and you're automatically entered to win any game from this entire list of your choosing. And now that little reminder's out of the way, let's get right into our recap. Number 60, Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel. Number 59, Guitar Hero Encore Rock the 80s. Number 58, Mortal Kombat Armageddon. Number 57, Illbleed. Number 56, Cuphead. Number 55, Breakdown. Number 54, Altered Beast. Number 53, Castle Crashers. Number 52, Katamari Forever. Number 51, Mickey's Racing Adventure. Now that we're all recapped, I just want to take a moment to thank you for sticking with me all the way through half of this entire series already. It's been a super fun one to make, and I'm really excited to see how the rest of it turns out for you guys. But as usual, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you again in the next one. Have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.